Russian President Vladimir Putin has compared the poisoning of a double agent in the UK to the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Britain imposed sanctions on Russia after accusing it of using a nerve agent to attack Sergei Skripal in March. Putin says while Western countries punished Russia, Saudi Arabia has faced little penalties over the Khashoggi case.
As for the Skripal affair, there's nothing for me to comment on. And Khashoggi, he's been assassinated. There is evidence, everyone has recognised that. As for Skripal, well, that's another matter entirely. So one thing has led to a whole heap of sanctions and the other to complete silence. That is the politicised Russophobic approach. That is yet another pretext in order to mount another attack on Russia. If there had been no Skripal incident, they would have come up with something else. There is only one goal I see behind it, and that is to constrain Russia, to prevent it from developing because we're seen as a rival.
Now, Alexey Khlebnikov is a Middle East analyst at the Russian International Affairs Council. He joins us now from Moscow. Thanks very much for being with us. So does the Russian president have a point here? Are there double standards when the West deals with Russia?
To a certain extent, of course, yes, because basically, as you rightly described in the beginning, that in one case, when there were allegations that no hard evidences for those two Russians and allegedly spies and Skripal and its poisoning, after in the end Skripal is alive and Khashoggi was killed, and actually even the top brasses in U.S. security services, they confirmed that there was no action done with regard to Saudi Arabia, because it is a crucial ally and U.S. partner. So apparently there is some double standards here.
Are countries like the UK really Russophobic, though?
Well, if you look back for several years now, you can see that this kind of anti-Russian rhetoric is on the rise, not only in the UK, but throughout the Western world. And of course, it is majorly connected with Crimea and eastern Ukraine, and previously back in late zeros in back to Russia-Georgian war. So it's kind of a continuous thing where Russia is being pressed and pushed from the West on something which they disagree. And as Russian president uses it as a Russophobic attempt, and actually he calls the main reason for that is that Russia's it's started to be more developed. It's basically restored its military potential and economic might after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And basically those approaches from Western countries are aimed at basically kneeling down or limiting Russia's developing capabilities. That's what the official Kremlin view is.
What do you say to those who argue that the Russian president is using this as an excuse, essentially? He's trying to deflect the conversation away from Russian misdeeds abroad, because the Skripal case it's not the first time that something like this has happened. There was, of course, the poisoning death of Alexander Litvinenko, who was a Russian double agent and defector, and the UK blamed the Russian state for that as well.
Of course, one can argue that that might certainly be a rationale behind Putin's word, that he tries to deflect attention from himself. But also, it's kind of important to notice that after the Khashoggi case, Russia didn't voice, volume up its voice and criticize Saudi Arabia, because actually it's quite important partner, growing important partner for Russia in the region. And another important thing, that Russia doesn't interfere into the internal affairs of other states. That's one of the most important lines which Russian leadership is pushing, Russian MFA, and they're pushing. So this is why it's kind of very tricky substance to talk about. On the one case, UK sees Skripal as interference in its own internal affairs. Khashoggi's assassination is also kind of interference in it was done on a Turkish soil, so it's very complicated substance, and it's very hard to navigate and basically draw concrete lines in who is doing what and trying to deflect from what foreign attention.
Good to speak with you. Alexey Khlebnikov joining us from Moscow. Thanks for being with us.